Welcome to a special double feature. In this video, I present two top 5 lists that, though different, are related. Top 5 games I hate that everyone likes, and top 5 games I like that everyone hates. Let's face it, as gamers, we all have our opinions about what games deserve a bit more love, and the games we want people to shut up about. These lists are, as a result, very much opinionated, and if you disagree with either of my opinions here, that's perfectly fine. Just remember that with these opinions, I'm not trying to criticize any of you personally, so I ask that you try to be as civil as possible. So, to start off this double top 5, I present the top 5 games I hate that everyone likes. Final Fantasy III, nope, not that Final Fantasy III, is a game that Japan loves. Though oddly enough, it was the last Japan-only Final Fantasy to see an American release in a remake. When it was finally remade on the DS and released in America, critics loved it. In my case, however, I played each Final Fantasy from 1 to 7, and I can safely say I enjoyed each one other than 3. I found that 3 simply has not aged well when I played it. Final Fantasy III's gameplay is essentially the same as the first games. There may be more job classes this time around, but it's the same kind of fare with your swordsmen, mages, thieves, and what have you. You can change classes like most job-based titles in the Final Fantasy series, except this game penalizes you for that by weakening your stats briefly when you switch. This is especially bad when going to face Garuda, a boss battle which pretty much forces you to have a party entirely of dragoons. Let me appeal to your common sense. What the hell kind of gameplay mechanic is that? Why the hell is there a Noctowl right beside me? While I can't speak ill of the story much since it was originally an NES game, this game has one of the most repetitive and predictable event formulas I've ever seen. It goes something like this. A village is in trouble. You go to the villain's lair. You kill the villain. The amount of times this formula repeats until something plot relevant happens is irritating to say the least. The characters are lame too. I won't get into the NES version since the characters were just job templates like the first game, but in the DS version, however, they created 4 distinguishable party members that suck. All of them have boring character traits and none of them develop. And as much as I hate Exdeath, when I think about it, the worst villain in Final Fantasy history has to be the villain from 3, Xande. You can tell he's lame from the get-go because all we know from build-up is that he's a sorcerer. That's all. After plowing through all his minions that he sent from the safety of the Crystal Tower, to my disappointment, he was, in fact, a cliched sorcerer. Who monologues, no less. So, we went from Chaos and the 4 Fiends to the Emperor, who conquered heaven and hell, to a f***ing wizard. Overall, I don't understand this game's popularity. It had decent graphics and music, but it had shallow gameplay, cliched storytelling, and dreadful characters. Oh, and that final dungeon can go get sent to hell and be ripped into table scraps by Cerberus for all I care. 3D redefined many of gaming's greatest genres. Final Fantasy VII revolutionized the RPG with its then groundbreaking graphics and memorable CG cutscenes. Super Mario 64 was the first 3D platformer, and in the beat-em-up genre, Devil May Cry's violent, bloody combat would become a staple in games like No More Heroes or God of War. However, to me, revolution does not mean perfection. In fact, out of those 3 examples, I can't stand Devil May Cry. While the concept is awesome, about a guy whose day job is devil hunting, I just can't get into the gameplay. To me, gameplay and control trumps story in a game. These are video games, and so if I can't enjoy playing them, then the games have failed their purpose. Devil May Cry's combat feels rather repetitive, and it doesn't seem nearly as gratifying as it did in No More Heroes or Mad World, which is odd when you consider some of Devil May Cry's famously stylish cutscenes. In Devil May Cry, the enemies are just nuisances. They don't really serve much purpose other than to get in your way, harm you, and give you points. To make matters worse, they respawn forever. In addition, the game's awkward lock-on system combined with this game's horrid Resident Evil-style camera system is a constant source of game overs. Speaking of Resident Evil, it's fair to note that this game has a deep atmosphere and excellent graphics for its time. However, for a game that was supposed to be the original Resident Evil 4, this game really is not scary at all. I mean, some of the enemies are friggin' Halloween decorations.
You want something scary?
Well, say hello to Bob.
Your pants feel hot now, don't they?
In terms of the game's music, the battle music in this game sounds almost exactly the same for both the enemy and boss battles. However, my biggest problem with this game is how the gameplay conflicts with its style. What I mean by that is Dante controls very stiffly in this game and can easily get killed by certain enemies, yet in cutscenes he looks a lot more mobile and he's portrayed as this literally invincible badass that can survive swords getting stuck in him. Speaking of cutscenes, this game's dialogue and acting are cheesy as all hell, but I admit it's probably the most enjoyable part of the game to me. Especially this little gem.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Devil May Cry's a weird one for me. I hate its gameplay, but I like smaller aspects of it. However, in my eyes, it isn't enough. It may have brought about more 3D beat-em-ups, improved sequels with the exception of 2, and one of the most unpleasable fan bases this side of Sonic the Hedgehog, but in my eyes, that's about it. Everyone's favorite RPG maker, Square, was at its prime during the mid-90s. In particular, its most popular games released during that time included Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, and Secret of Mana. I'd played the ports of Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger and loved them, so naturally I wanted to give Secret of Mana a spin while it was on Virtual Console. I bought it, and I almost instantly hated it.
Hey!
Hey Josh, what's up?
That's exactly what happened to me before I started to hate Secret of Mana, you plagiarist!
Well, what I said was kind of the truth. No, seriously. That's exactly what happened to me when I first played Secret of Mana.
Wow. That is really bizarre. Add hatred of Secret of Mana to the list of things that make us similar.
Guess so.
Oh yeah, you trash your copy of Okami yet?
Nope. Not planning on it either.
So, yeah. My first indication that I was going to hate this game was when I watched the intro. The plot, as told through the intro, revolves around a plot device, force, called mana, which is used to create an ultimate weapon. This angers the gods, who attempt and fail to destroy the mana fortress, until a warrior with a mana sword comes in and smashes the fortress.
Smashing a fortress. How does one smash a fortress with a sword?
Our introduction to the main character even sucks. While adventuring with his friends Bulk and Skull here, he falls off a freaking waterfall. The gameplay bores me too. Fighting enemies and bosses can be irritating, especially when some of their attacks cheaply home in on you, while often you have to use precise physical strikes. I have heard that this game is better when it uses its multiplayer feature, which does sound cool, but without people into teaming up for this kind of crap, it loses meaning. And if you decide to go alone, you'll go through the whole tedious game until you reach the mana tree, where the boy finds out that the mana tree is his mother! No!
I'm sorry. I just can't take that seriously. And I know it was played straight. I know we were supposed to take it seriously, but you don't think that sounds, at the very least, weird?
Lastly, music in this game is very hit or miss for me. While songs like Fear of the Heavens are beautiful, Danger reminds me of the melodious sounds of a blaring siren rather than a good boss theme, and The Sorcerer sounds like the game is deliberately mocking you. Secret of Mana. As a whole, I don't feel it's held up at all. It might have been good back then, but even then it got one-upped later by Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger. I can see why someone would like this game, but it's not for me. Number 2 is an entire series. Now, while I don't find all the games in this series are bad, I find the vast majority of them are mediocre at best. Coupled with how often these games are shelled out, this has led me to hate what these games represent in gaming culture. This is the Mega Man and Mega Man X series. Now, don't get me wrong, their concept was the original awesome power-stealing gimmick, but it got tired really fast. I have played various Mega Man and Mega Man X games, and though I admit I haven't played all of them, almost all of the ones I've played were basically the same game over and over with no innovation between the games. And that's not counting all the other sub-series there are, which I haven't heard are exactly stellar either. The jump from Mega Man 1 to 2 was huge, though after 2, the games almost entirely fell under the same formula. 8 robot enemies, go through a castle, defeat Wily or Sigma. To this day, this has only been averted once. The abilities and Robot Masters even got tired after a while, with abilities being constantly reused, especially shield weapons, and supposedly new things like 6's rush adapters came across as more gimmicks rather than revolutionary items. And the Mega Man X games hardly innovated at all. Though the first game was fantastic, everything after that just got worse to the point of being bad. While I admit I'm not a fan of the games themselves, save for Mega Man's 9 and X, and even that's mainly due to the gameplay not being my thing, why I hate this series is because of what they represent to me. It represents to me that game companies don't have to care about whether a game is up to standard or original. They just exist as a cheap, quick cash-in made every few months. With a small amount of development time given between one Mega Man game and the next, this doesn't often leave much time to truly innovate, leaving subsequent games to go stale. And when something goes stale, it will inevitably become worse. I'll give you the series' best example of such deterioration. Mega Man X5 was intended to be the last Mega Man X game by series creator Keiji Inafune. It ended up with the apparently final deaths of Zero and Sigma. However, Capcom decided to make another game anyways without his consent. What followed was a poorly designed and poorly translated mess of a game which somehow led to 2 more sequels due to its success. The end result of X7 and X8 can be summed up as such. Burn to the ground! Burn to the ground! Overall, I do not care about the Mega Man games. I may hate what they represent with a burning passion, but the games themselves I merely just shrug off. Number 1, however... Legend of Zelda series is fantastic. Keeping in mind that I look for gameplay over story in video games, these games 9 times out of 10 have gameplay and control that are flawless in almost every aspect. And even then the stories are pretty damn good, if formulaic. However, this does leave the other 1 out of 10, which happens to be number 1 on this top 5. The Legend of Zelda...
Who are you?
You're going to Lost Oregon!
In English, please.
Ocarina of Time! Yeah, so Ocarina of Time again, just like you did in top 15 greatest final battles! Not gonna let you do that again, you wild monster, you!
But
I bet you went into the sacred realm and turned into a pig, just like Ken did, you swine of an internet reviewer!
Hey, look!
You ruined my childhood! You had no childhood of your own! So you went and you destroyed mine, you wretched motherfucker!
I don't hate Ocarina of Time!
In fact, I love it! Honestly, I regret what I said in my greatest final battles list by calling Ocarina of Time outdated. Aside from the story, which is at times a bit thin, in hindsight the game is pretty damn flawless. I owe my earlier anger towards the game to the fact that I played the game first on Virtual Console, whose control is usually stiffer than the original games. So, when I recently replayed Ocarina of Time on the 3DS, it had sublime control, as I'm sure the N64 version did, and I was engrossed in the game. Again, if I can't play the game, then I won't be entertained by it, period. But I was sure as hell entertained here. The dungeons, the bosses, and even the side quests were all great. So, bottom line, Ocarina of Time has held up. It's not my favorite Zelda, that would be Wind Waker, but yet I recognize the game as an eternal classic.
So, there you have it. Now, as I was about to say, my pick for number 1 is The Legend of Zelda.
Hold up! You're so insulting a Zelda game, you!
Hey! I just saw a Malon cosplayer at the convention center. I hear she's giving free rides.
Oh, this is gonna be the opportunity of a lifetime!
Number 1 on this list is actually 2 Zelda games. So, be prepared, because I hate The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Ages, and Oracle of Seasons. Or, as I like to call them, Link's Awakening Capcom Edition. Yeah, these 2 games were actually co-developed by Capcom and made off Link's Awakening's engine. Throughout both these games, I couldn't help but notice a few things like, hey, that song was from Link's Awakening. Hey, isn't that Lanmola's shadow from Link's Awakening? Hey, that was the warp sound effect from Link's Awakening. Wow, Link looks so poorly drawn when compared to those new trees. Wait, that guy was once a boss! That's right. These games lazily reused sprites and music from Link's Awakening, done in such a way that the old did not blend with the new, and they did a poor job at hiding this recycling. To me, that's inexcusable, because I know for sure that Capcom is able to make a Zelda game with more consistent graphics and sound. But wait. With all that talk about gameplay being superior to presentation, what does the autarch think of the gameplay? Well, I think it was poorly done too. The whole time manipulation and season manipulation of these games feels like a gimmick to me. And not particularly well done gimmicks either. For comparison, the time travel mechanic in Majora's Mask contributed a sense of urgency and atmosphere to the whole game as the end of the world gets closer. In Oracle of Ages, the time travel simply isn't interesting, and frankly it feels like a poor man's version of the Dark World mechanic from Link to the Past. Using Link's Awakening's engine, the developers of the Oracle games did something that baffles me. They decreased the amount of invincibility frames you get. Let me ask you this. Why? In Link's Awakening, having more invincibility frames gave you a chance to react to different enemy patterns. In the Oracle games, there's a chance that you will take a ton of damage in a second because the game just simply doesn't give you enough time to react to enemy onslaughts. This just doesn't make any sense. They reused so much from Link's Awakening, so why couldn't they have just used the same invincibility rate? This is something you'd see in a fan hack of a video game. These are my most hated games that everyone likes because they sounded so good on paper, and yet when I played them it felt like I was playing watered down versions of Link's Awakening with poor presentation and poor gameplay. Now, it's common sense that making two games at the same time is a ton of work, but these games simply do not look polished. And for a game in the Legend of Zelda series, that is unacceptable. One last thing. What's with all the random cameos from other Zelda characters? Are the games just trying to slam it in our faces that the games are worthy of the Zelda title because it has recognizable characters? Yeah, because reminding us all of Kepra Gebra is the best way to say you're worthy of the Zelda name.
To conclude this top 5, I'm the Autarch of Flame, and I'm going to kill that Noctowl! Weird.
This ends top 5 games I hate that everyone likes. In this second part, I'm going to talk about the games I feel people give a bit too much petty hate, or are ignored for whatever reason despite having earned positive reviews. Let us begin. Kirby Canvas Curse is often ignored by Kirby fans despite it ironically having a similar format to the regular Kirby games. The thing is, this game literally uses no buttons, controlling purely with the DS stylus. This results in you literally drawing paths for Kirby to ride and use to beat enemies and take their powers as per usual. I can see why this would alienate purist fans due to its unconventional controls, but from a technical perspective, this game fascinates me due to how precise the mechanic is. The tight controls lead to some really neat scenarios, namely the difficult special courses, and this game's final battle, which follows the Kirby tradition of being genuinely enjoyable, artsy, and rather disturbing. Plus, there's a fast-paced drawing minigame which I fully admit to returning to on multiple occasions due to how challenging and addicting it is. Innovative, well-designed, and with some genuinely fun content, Kirby Canvas Curse utilizes the DS to its fullest potential, and I feel it deserves a better rep. Until the release of Donkey Kong Country Returns in 2010, it had been 14 years since the last main series Donkey Kong Country game came out. In between then, various other Donkey Kong games were released, to varying degrees of success. One of these, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, was loved by critics, though it seems to have faded into obscurity among fans. Several things I've heard among the Donkey Kong fanbase have been disparaging towards this game because it doesn't play like any other game in this series, nor does it have any kind of familiar characters from the main series aside from DK himself. That's kind of sad to me because this game was revolutionary in several ways, and yeah, I loved playing it too. The game uses the DK bongo controller, where you hit the bongos and clap to perform actions. The game actually controls very smoothly considering the different method of play, and the gameplay is pretty damn addicting because of how unique it is. The boss fights are decent in this game, and though many are essentially repeats of the same 3 bosses, they're worth it in the end for the Kong battles, where you get into one-on-one fistfights with other evil Kongs. The presentation is excellent as well, with a few memorable songs and the single best graphics on the whole GameCube. Seriously, how did they animate all those hairs on DK's body? Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. It's a different DK adventure, but man was it fun. So many people overlook Pokemon's 3rd generation despite all of its advances. No, you couldn't trade between the first 2 generations. Yes, they took out time features. However, they brought so much new to the table than they took away, so it's sad that a lot of people tend to look upon these games as the worst generation of Pokemon. For one, they introduced abilities. These gave all the Pokemon more personality otherwise than just simply having stats, a type, and moves. Not only that, but abilities expanded on the possibilities in new Pokemon, such as Castform's ability to change type and appearance in different weather conditions. Then they added double battles, which by itself cemented Pokemon as a recognized competitive video game series. Not to mention, they added some of my favorite Pokemon ever this generation. Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald were all great. While not doing much to expand on story, the sheer variety in the locations was just so cool. Colosseum and XD weren't that bad in my eyes, with Colosseum especially having a strange kind of charm to it. If only because it included older generation Pokemon that could be traded to the Game Boy games. Also, Fire Red and Leaf Green, though I'm not a fan of these games myself, made two classic games available for newer players to try out themselves. So, though Pokemon's third generation took many risks, overall I feel it all still adds up to the same level of Pokemon quality. I'll fully admit, for newer Zelda players, Zelda 2 is a game that's tough to access. It's the most different game in the series and undoubtedly the toughest, but it doesn't make it a bad game. In fact, I enjoyed this game more than the original Legend of Zelda. Zelda 2 is a side-scroller, which is obviously a far cry from the top-down gameplay of the other 2D Zelda games. However, this makes sense because the Zelda series hadn't developed a full-on formula for itself yet. The difficulty in this game was completely real. The game was tough, but you could always level up due to it being an action RPG, and it controlled rather nicely. The combat in this game was mostly flawless, save for the infamous Dark Link glitch, and overall I loved fighting enemies that were as big as Link was head-on. What I also liked in this game was the in-depth exploration. Finding certain items required that you go into caves, which certainly came a long way from the tiny wizard caves in the original game, since they were packed with enemies out to kill you. Some of the caves and palaces in this game were challenges even for this game. Death Mountain is a maze full of some of the strongest foes in the game, and the Great Palace is such a huge challenge that the only checkpoint in the game is at this palace. So if you're into a challenge but want one that plays rather fairly, then Zelda 2 is a great game for you. It's a classic game, but I find it's unfairly picked on for being the odd one out in the series. Luigi's Mansion. This is a game where I'm honestly confused as to what people even expected from it. When people asked for a game starring Luigi, did they want a platformer starring him? Well, that would be redundant because 1, it would be like playing a Mario game except with a different sprite and controls, and 2, that's already been done before. Personally, I'm waiting for Paper Luigi, but that's beside the point. Luigi's Mansion was just so enjoyable. The whole game, you're sucking up ghosts with a vacuum cleaner and triggering their weaknesses through creative means. That is an awesome concept if I ever saw one. The game also had great presentation with surreal ghost design and a truly spooky atmosphere, with special mention going to the blackout scene. The game had some replay value with a hard mode and multiple ending outcomes. The game was kind of short though, and the story was more of an excuse plot. This game may not be a Mario platformer, but it was something unique and it truly deserves a better rep than it gets in some circles. As I see it, Luigi's Mansion is a GameCube classic with its own unique charm, making it more than worthy of the #1 spot on this top 5. And with that, this double top 5 has come to a close.
I'm the Autark of Flame, and I'm going to end this review on a lighter note. Next episode is Top 10 Nostalgic Animated Shows.
So, how long do you think it's gonna take until it gets here?
It's from Japan. I'd imagine it'll take like a month or two, maybe.
A month or two, but dude, university's right around the corner. Are you sure it's going to get here before you go out?
I'm sure it will. Time can be pretty weird like that sometimes.
Well, alright, in theory, time might move faster here than the universe far, far away, but still.
Stranger things have happened. I'm gonna go put on some tunage.
Okay. Flame! There's somebody down here!
False alarm, dude?
What? But he was right there! There!
Sure you're feeling alright after, you know, Delibird?
Hey! You're the one who... Sword! Fish! Gah!